in search of soil.
Tips on being a good operator. What are some things you really want to watch for when you're feeding feedstock into, let's just use a cone kiln, for example?
Well, a cone kiln, there's a couple of ways of how one starts a cone kiln. One can either fill it all up and start it on top and let it burn down. I prefer where you start a little fire in the bottom and start adding material. And so as that material one looks, you go like any fire, you get it started with smaller material, with your kindling, and you come to bigger. But say a fire is going now. By visually, you look at that fire. When it looks as though you can see that the flames have died down, it's like a charcoal barbecue burning now. And then you start to see ash forming. Add your next layer. You will then get some smoke come off, and you'll get more flame, because that heat from below is what is driving out the volatile gases in the material you've just added. And because of the design, as you know, of a cone kiln, there's no air coming in from below. The only air comes over the top. So you're creating that oxygen-starved environment. And when you look at it, you'll see that the flames are not on the material. The flame is actually above the material. The flame, and as you come up, the flame is actually at the top of your cone, because that's where the gases rise. The oxygen that comes over the top mixes with the gases and ignites. Again, so watch that flame go down. The flame comes down to the charcoal that's left, the biochar. Add your next layer and let it burn. And another rule of thumb is you add, so that you fully burn everything, char everything, is that in the middle of your burn is where you add your larger materials. And if you have a large Kontiki kiln that's maybe 4 or 5 foot in diameter, you could be adding feedstock that's 2-3 inches in diameter in that middle of that burn. As you get towards the top, then start reducing the size again so that it gets fully pyrolyzed and fully turned to charcoal before you quench it. So it's the visual. And I'll give one example of, it's our relationship, and it's the operator's relationship with the fire, with the stove, kiln, whatever they're using. I worked with a group called Char with an Art Donnelly, and Char built some top-lit updraft stove T-Luds out of 5-gallon pails and he was using them in Costa Rica for migrant workers, farmers that were picking cacao beans and coffee beans. And they were making biochar. So Art went down at when we brought these down, he was working with an NGO down there. He was an NGO. And he had the stove, and he was demonstrating to the women, because it's women that do the cooking in Costa Rica. And so it's been the thought that you can't add, with a top lit, you put in your one load and you don't add any materials afterwards. Well, the cookers, the women that were operating these stoves, are doing it, and then all of a sudden, they kind of lifted the lid and they started to put more material in, and Art was going to say, no, don't. And he just backed off. And he let them do what they do, even though they were using a new stove. And Art said, they did things with that stove I did not think was possible. And what I learned that day is they have a relationship with fire that I will never have, because they cook 3 meals a day over fire. And so I'm sure from the very first burn you did with your cone kiln to where you are today, your relationship with fire is becoming more part of you. And so your experience of what you do it is practice. It's practice. It's practice makes perfect.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out some of the great clips and watch the full interviews right here on In Search of Soil.